Long time no see, YouTube. So yeah, I don't have well, this video, I've called this video "The Metaverse is Consciousness." Um there's a lot of how do I begin this? How do I begin this little thing? The internet, the metaverse. There are so many changes occurring and so many ideas and concepts being conflated with one another at the moment. Um, and Give me a second. It's going to take me a minute to get into this little vibe here. I haven't been talking on video for a while, but uh, yeah. Let's start with the whole Facebook metaverse thing, right? So Facebook announced that they changed their name to Metaverse, and that seems like well, I mean, there's some people are sort of talking about, oh no, oh no, how could it be? How could I want to be part of this kind of a thing? But I think what's going on actually is part of a broader change technologically and socially. Uh, and the interesting part about this, of course, because my vibe and stuff tends to be about consciousness, right? But there's interesting aspects to this in a bunch of ways. So one of my main point here is that the metaverse, like a lot of people seem to be against the idea of a metaverse and being involved in some kind of virtual reality, and like we need to enjoy this world. We need to enjoy this world and not some virtual world. Uh, and that seems like really valid in a lot of ways. Like it seems like a valid. Those are valid points, right? Uh, However, the yeah, I think part of the reason for that, part of the reason for the sort of rejection of the metaverse concept by many people, is that it seems thin. It seems like compared to the real world, like some kind of virtual world created by humans seems thin and unnatural and boring and this kind of stuff, right? And I think there's some truth to that. Um, however, um, However, I think there's a lot more to it than that, potentially. Well, listen, I'm kind of like kind of slow getting off the ground here. But my point is that the what happens is like consciousness is sort of self-reflexive and it has a sort of fractal quality to it. And so while it seems while it seems like a metaverse concept could be really thin and lack substance, it probably won't be like that. And a good way of thinking about this is just thinking about it in terms of like the just like the internet generally, because we all thought the internet was going to like it seemed like it wasn't really real, but it's actually had a whole bunch of power about connecting people and actually doing a lot of valuable relationship connections, and a whole bunch of really like worthwhile stuff have come out of like Web 1 and Web 2. And this is the other thing too. I mean, this whole thing about the metaverse is really the metaverse is like an interesting collision between what? It seems like it's a collision really between. See, people don't think this is what it is. People think it's just the technology, right? It's just technology. That's what it is. It's technology trying to take over. But what it really is it's really a collision, hopefully, between the technology and spirituality. as at least as we understand it, right? Um, and in a way, like the metaverse, whatever we want to call it. And I'm talking, I mean, I mentioned the Facebook metaverse, right? I mean, that's a product, right? The Facebook metaverse is a product by the Facebook company. But I think that that's part of a much broader movement. It seems like no, I used to do like internet development back in the day. I've been out of the game for a long time, but it seems like the metaverse, as proposed by Facebook, is actually part of a much broader movement known as Web3, which basically is a whole bunch of technologies, not just Facebook. Facebook's actually the least interesting part about it, really, but it's a whole bunch of technologies. So I think the main part about the metaverse is, and this is where it ties into spirituality. It's about the idea of connecting. It's about the idea of making real the virtual world. It's making the virtual world real, right? It's what it's about. Now, how do you make a virtual world real? Because nobody's going to believe that. Like I work in 3D graphics. I mean, this could be great for me. This could be good business. But how do you make 3D worlds feel real? How do you engage people so that they feel invested in the 3D world? How would you do that? And of course, uh, the way you do it is you actually make the virtual worlds work off of real currency, right? Oh, we see. The thing is, I think it's not spirituality doesn't have to merge with technology. It doesn't have to. It's already done. It's already done. The problem is we're just not aware of it. We're just not aware that that's what's going on because we're so caught up with our thought streams as they exist now. Like we are so attached and so connected to our idea of what spirituality is. So when this other idea of a metaverse comes in, oh no, we feel conflicted and we attach even stronger to the thought stream we've got about what spirituality means. The whole thing is like a joke. The whole thing is a joke to simply make you attach more to any thought stream, right? So consciousness is like a game, and what it wants to do is it wants to use fear and conflict to force you to attach to consciousness, right? And so technology and spirituality don't have to merge. What you have to do is you have to sort of separate from your own thought stream and realize, listen, it doesn't matter. In the same way that our consciousness was able to move into Web 2, like we were able to move into the internet, right? Back in 1992, dude, I didn't even have any idea what this was. 1997, my boss was trying to buy me a cell phone, and I was like, dude, I don't want a cell phone. I don't want you calling me, right? And now, like, we're online all the time. It became really easy. It became our primary mode of communication. I've made so many important contacts online, so many spiritual connections, right? Um, Without even realizing it. My point is the idea that the internet back as we imagined it back in 1995 seemed like a flat piece of paper. Like, oh, and that flat piece of paper was is like a metaphor for like a 14.4K modem connection, right? It's a very thin data feed, right? So it doesn't seem like much can happen, but the data feed in a way represents a strand of consciousness, right? It's a strand of consciousness, and that strand of consciousness can branch out, and that's what's happened. Like I had resistance to this internet thing and being connected, a lot of resistance to it, but it actually branched out, and it's been a really valuable thing. It's been a really valuable thing in my life, and I think that's probably what's happening with the metaverse too. And I think obviously when Facebook talks about metaverse, it's obnoxious and because Facebook's obnoxious. Facebook. I got banned from Facebook last week because I mentioned some truths about COVID, which you're just not allowed to say the truth, right? You can't say true things about it. It's outrageous. It's so outrageous, and Facebook deserves to be destroyed. And fingers crossed that happens, and fingers crossed their whole metaverse thing collapses. And there's a good chance that kind of thing might happen because Web3 is such a massive paradigm shift, and a part of this is being fueled, like, just so you know, like, I haven't been online for like a month. There's a bunch of reasons for that. I had tons of work. I Funnily enough, one of the big jobs I was doing is I've been working on some NFT stuff for a company in Ohio. NFT is the non-fungible token stuff, and kind of getting into the crypto metaverse kind of a thing, right? Um, and this is really interesting because I haven't really been involved in crypto much, and my brother got involved with it, and he made a fortune on Bitcoin. Lucky him. But all of a sudden, like in the last month, it just like everything just clicked. This whole crypto thing just clicked. I'm like, I get it. And I mean, I understood the idea of crypto. I understand that Bitcoin's is like digital gold, and I understand that I understand fractional reserve banking and how it's corrupt, and how that any form of decentralization is good. Actually, if you're on the members section, I don't know if this is public, but before this channel was about ayahuasca, I think back in 2009, I was playing with some of my first videos on YouTube, and one of my first videos was about decentralization. And this is before we knew anything about anything, right? I was talking about how decentralization has to be the future, right? And so what's really amazing is how this Web3 really is about decentralization, which is against globalism. No, it's not necessarily against globalism, right? Not necessarily, because there's a whole bunch of manipulation being done in the Web3, or in the crypto space, basically, right? So in the crypto space is being highly manipulated to maintain the power structures of central banks, who are obviously the prime. They're the progenitors of centrality and corruption and slavery. Um, so anyway, so I've been working in these projects, and all of a sudden it just sort of clicked, and I'm like, in a really interesting way, because like my background's in web development, and then I got into like three-dimensional stuff, and funnily enough, like the whole NFT stuff is and a lot of the metaverse is based on these. I mean, the metaverse will be built with 3D people, right? It's going to be built with polygons and virtual spaces. Now, the funny thing is like virtual. It seems. Here's the thing. I don't know if you've probably played some 3D games. My kids are playing games all day long, right? They're playing one now called Genshu. Um, I don't know what it is, but Fortnite and all this stuff. But if you've played any of these games, and I remember back in 1998 or whatever, we were playing Doom or whatever on the network, and man, those games are fun. But there's also a part where you're just running around and thinking, this is really boring, right? There's just like this is boring because the algorithms aren't sophisticated enough to make it interesting. And you're playing against a machine, and you're not actually working against consciousness itself. You're not working against another human consciousness. That's what makes it boring, right? That's why things like Facebook are interesting, because your adversaries are humans, right? That's why Facebook, in a way, is or any social network can be more interesting than a game, because those social networks are games, right? You're getting social credit. You've got interaction and fighting with real people. You walk away humiliated and angry, or you've won. I won the fight, right? Whatever it is, right? Um, but those games, when you run around those 3D games, there's this sense of like excitement when you learn it, but once like the rules are pretty simple, so it gets boring pretty quickly, right? It's kind of like if you if you're sitting in your house by yourself for a week, the first couple of days you're like, oh, this is great, peace and quiet, and then afterwards you're like, okay, now what do I do? And so the thing is, there's this. The problem is space. The problem is space and the creation of meaning, right? The creation of meaning in space. And what is space to begin with? Um, Now, I was watching an interesting chat with Rupert Spiro the other day, who's the non-dual teacher, and this guy was there. It was like a satsang, and there was a guy there. There was a guy there who had some emotional problem. He was like, "I'm really upset." He's like, "I keep finding that I'm angry. I'm really angry." And Rupert Spiro says to him, well, he's like, well, let's trace back from the anger. Let's go. We start with the emotion, and let's trace back from there, and we come back and like, who's angry? Like, let's come back and who actually? And the guy's like, I'm angry. He's like, yeah, but he's like, who is observing the anger, right? So it's the classic non-dual thing, like who is observing the anger? And eventually he talks the guy back, and the guy's like, oh, he's like, actually, there's just awareness. There's just awareness. And he's like, right. And he's like, inside the awareness, what is there? He's like, well, that's where all the anger is. It's like all these anger and everything. That's there. He's like, so what am I? And the guy's like, it's nothingness. It's just space. And Rupert's like, yes. Now you understand. It's just space, right? It's just space. That's what it is. Um, and so this idea of the space actually being this point of just awareness, right? Um, Now what happens is that space can take space the space can take many forms, right? Space can take many forms. So, for example, what can I show you? What can I show you here? Here's one. Hold on a second. Here's an old sock, right? Inside this sock, there's a space, right? But that space is that's a really thin space here. Inside that, let me stretch it. There's a space inside the sock which is really thin, right? It's really thin, right? But obviously, if I was to stretch the sock out, all of a sudden it's kind of the same space, but it's changed form. Now in this case, it's being defined like by the volume of air, the stretching of material. Um, but the point is that space is like it can be an extremely thin space, and that's how when we approach these new representations of consciousness, um, they can seem thin and like they have no contents. There's no contents in these spaces, right? But what Rupert Spiro was pointing out to that guy was like, listen, the space is your awareness, but what happens inside the space actually isn't you. What happens inside the space is actually, what is it? What is inside the space? If it isn't you, what the hell is going inside the space? And what it is generally, at least in terms of like in terms of your like psychology and your internal dialogue, that space is created by thought forms which are not us, but we identify as them. Right? There's Dude, it's crazy. It's crazy. So this is actually the thing. What Rupert Spiro was doing with that guy was really valuable, because what you might find is like for example, this morning I woke up and I had all these thoughts going through my head, and I'm like, oh, I'm worried about this and this, and then I saw something on the internet which really upset me, and I was like, oh my god, and I was like, wait a minute, Scott, and I remembered Rupert Spiro, and I just I pull back from it a little bit, and I'm like none of these thoughts, it's not the only thing that makes it your thoughts is that you believe they're yours. But when you separate, when you recognize that you are awareness, you can separate from the thoughts. The thoughts keep going on. You don't have to be attached to them. You can just watch them go on. They go on without your approval. And what happens is the moment you pull your awareness, you see, your awareness, when your awareness attaches energetically to a thought structure, that's what gives it life. But the moment you pull back and say, hey, listen, I'm awareness, the thought just kind of like, it gets like, kind of, it just dissolves. Like after a few minutes, it kind of gets a little, dissolves. And then you can wait for a couple minutes, and a new idea will come in, and now it's sort of dancing around trying to get your attention. And there are always things which are they're always like seem like the most important or the darkest or the scariest ideas. That's what I'm saying. Only it's not synthetic conscious. Well, it is in a way it is synthetic consciousness because I mean it's calling it synthetic consciousness is it's a good place to start. The thing is all consciousness is synthetic in a sense, right? Now, in a way, it's not synthetic because that's all we know. The only thing we know is synthetic consciousness, right? But the whole movement of enlightenment or awakening is becoming aware that we're not consciousness, we are awareness, right? So there's a sort of division, like awareness and consciousnesses. Awareness and consciousness are two words we might think of the same thing, but in like the Advaita teachings or the non-dual teachings, what the understanding is that awareness and consciousness are different, and so consciousness is what we think we are. But once we learn to separate from consciousness, we realize that we're just really watching what's going on here. Now, the way Rupert Spiro explains this is he explains it using a metaphor of an actor. And he says there's an actor called John Smith, and John Smith's playing King Lear, I think it is. He's playing King Lear at the Shakespeare Theatre. And so he goes in there, or it's Henry, it's one, or Richard III, I don't know. It's one of the, let's just say King Lear. So he goes in, he plays King Lear at the theater, and he's a famous performer, and he's like a method actor. He gets really into the role of King Lear. Then at the end of the play, he leaves and he goes into the dressing room, but something happens. When he goes into the dressing room, his wife comes in and is like, "Hey, how are you doing, John?" But he doesn't realize that he's John Smith anymore. He thinks he's King Lear, right? And so he's caught up in the emotions and dynamics of the play, and he's forgotten that he's actually John Smith. Now, Rupert Spira, whatever his name is, he says that that's kind of a metaphor for what we are. We all think that we are King Lear. So all the thoughts that are in your mind, we think that's who we are, and we don't realize that we're actually John Smith. We don't realize we're this separate character. So what it is, it's like a play within a play. And what I would say to you is the metaverse is a play within a play within a play, right? So what the metaverse actually represents, it represents a movement of consciousness to try and deepen it's sort of like it's deepening the sort of the fractalization of it's almost as a way of like confusing or hypnotizing awareness deeper into consciousness. Now, there's a really good example of how this works. Like a few years back, I was like interested in like how hypnosis works. So I was reading a few people. There was one guy I got into. What was his name? Igor. Um, Forgot his name. There was one guy who was really good. But one of the techniques they use in hypnosis is you might hypnotize people using a narrative. And so I'll just show you a quick example of how that might work. So, and I'm not a hypnotist, but the example is you might say something like this. You might say, okay, imagine, and you can use this in meditations too. Like if you're doing a group meditation, this is quite a good way of doing it. So what you might do is you'd say, okay, imagine like you're walking along a beautiful pathway in a forest. Oh wow, okay. So now we're in the forest, right? And so the mind is engaged with the idea of a forest, right? And then uh, you come across a doorway in like on a hillside. That's a strange image. There's a doorway in the hillside, and you decide to open the door. So you open the door and you walk into a brilliant light. Now, what's happened there is I've engaged the I've engaged your mind with this image of a forest, right? And now there's a door, and we've stepped inside the door. Now that door actually represents, it's a layer of consciousness. We've moved inside of it. Okay, so now we've moved inside of the door, and there's a bright light from the corner, and in the corner we notice there's a treasure box. Wow. And there's like gold light emanating from the holes in the treasure box. So we walk over there and we lift the treasure box, and wow, there's a diamond, which is glowing golden light. And then as we look at the diamond, we suddenly find ourselves being transported inside the diamond, right? And now, as we move inside the diamond, we're surrounded by spirals and mandalas, and all of a sudden, in the distance, I see a unicorn. Now, so what's happened is I've gone from the forest into the house, into a treasure box, inside of a diamond, and not so there's like four layers of entrance into another layer of consciousness, into another layer of consciousness. Now, this sounds kind of goofy, but I noticed, like in some of the Tibetan Buddhist teachings, like this is one of the things they do. So you'll do a visualization of somebody's heart, and then you'll visualize a diamond inside of their heart, and then inside the diamond you'll visualize green Tara, and then inside of green Tara you'll visualize her heart, right? The space within the space, right? That's it. And so what this does is it leads you metaphorically into a space. Now, if you're aware of all this stuff, then you're just existing in space, right? You're just in awareness, watching it play out. But what typically happens, and this is what happens if you go to the movies, you'll go to the movies, and they call that like the suspension of disbelief, right? So you get the suspension of disbelief, and you believe the movie. Unless the filmmaker screws up. Like, for example, I tried watching The Matrix 4 the other day, and I had to turn it off after 5 minutes because of all the horse shit, virtue signaling crap. I just couldn't. I just had to turn that garbage off. Anyway, right. I mean, it's just unbelievable. The film, which is supposed to demonstrate this, is just filled with garbage. Anyway, the idea of the space within the space it's really interesting. Now, this is something I use in meditation all the time, and I use it specifically to pull my mind deeper into specific spaces. And there's a whole bunch of different there's a whole bunch of different zones, or there are different ways of thinking about. I guess I'm using the word spaces, right? Spaces, which can be confusing because I'll say zones. I guess there's a whole bunch of different zones of consciousness. So, like what I just did just now with that story was I was using like a narrative to pull the mind into sort of different symbolic spaces, right? Um, and so it really is sort of the whole thing is like a fractal, but because the fractal is using consciousness and because it's invisible, it's difficult to identify it as a fractal. So for example, right now, if I say to you, think about the skin of your fingers or the hand, think about the skin around the hand, right? That's clearly a different focus than a unicorn inside of a diamond, right? So if we think about the unicorn inside the diamond, inside of a treasure box, inside of a house, inside of a forest, that's a certain space. Now let's just think about the hand. Now, what is the difference between those two locations of focus? So what they have in common is we're locating our attention on both of them, but it's difficult to think about both of those things at the same time, right? Um, but the what's interesting about it though is there's like a real what's interesting about it is what they have in common. And what they have in common is our awareness, right? We can be aware of both of those things. Now, one of those things seems like it's real, right? My hand feels like it's a real thing. That unicorn inside a diamond, that's a crazy imaginative idea, right? And yet, in the moment, my awareness was quite engaged with that for a second, right? So, so what's the difference there, right? What is the difference between those two ideas? They both Is it the difference between real and imaginary? And then the other difference is like the imaginary aspect of that story. The imaginative aspect of that story is one aspect, but the other aspect of that story is like one part of it is the visual that becomes created in your mind, right? There's a clear visual there, like of walking through a forest, going into a house, finding a golden lit treasure box with a diamond inside, with a unicorn inside the diamond, right? So there's a clear visual image in there, but there's also another separation there because there's also the words which I'm using, right? So there's the idea, there's a sort of mental construct which I'm building, and that mental construct emits imagery, right? So I'm coming up with a narrative which is some kind of mental construct, and that seems to generate imagery. So some people might categorize those ideas as the mental construct which creates a narrative would be the mental body, right? The imagery which is generated is the astral body of that idea, right? And then this thing, my hand or the skin around my hand, is the physical body, right? Now, what those they've got a couple of things in common. One thing they've got in common is they've got the awareness of those things in common. The other things they've got in common is that they're actually all forms of consciousness in the same in the same way as I was saying that consciousness and awareness are distinct things, but consciousness itself is composed of four different elements: the physical, the astral, the well, I'll just stick with the elements: the earth, physical; water, astral; fire. What the hell is that called? Air is mental, and the fire. What the hell is the fire? I forgot what that's called. Okay, the four elements. So those represent they represent different aspects of consciousness, right? So the imagery which is generated will, the imagery which is generated is literally the astral plane. Now, what happens is because people don't know how to really engage with that, they tend not to astral project into the plane. Even though just that little journey we just did is like a low key astral projection. I mean, that's kind of what uh, that's kind of what it is. It's what was the word? What was the phrase I was just using? It's like what happens in a film. You go see the movies and you believe in it, right? It's the same thing as happens with a little imaginary story there. For that moment, we get engaged. Awareness becomes engaged with the story, and what happens is the mental construct combined with awareness. It's almost like awareness. Awareness is what makes everything real. You see, consciousness can't exist without the light of awareness, right? That's why when Rupert Spira was talking to that guy who had all these emotional problems, he was saying, go back and become aware of your awareness. And once he became aware of the awareness, the the energy structures or the ideas, the emotional problems he had started disintegrating. Because when he became aware of awareness, it became obvious that it was the energy, the thoughts were only there because he was giving them his energy, because he was giving them his awareness. That was why they existed. And the moment you pull awareness from them, they disintegrate because they can't exist without your attention. So this getting back to the metaverse is these spaces of consciousness uh, exist exist in a bunch of ways. Like like I was just talking about, they exist in these different layers of consciousness, right? So there's layers. There's like in the narrative there were sort of visual layers. So in the astral level, in the imaginary level, there was actually imagery which seemed to sort of connect with one thing inside of another, like a Russian doll. Uh, On the mental level, there was kind of like a narrative which was leading things along. Um, and then there was this awareness, which was kind of aware of what was happening. And then we talked about the hand and how that was a completely different type of awareness, thinking about something in the physical world. But is it really that different? Is it really that different? For example, right now, I just was thinking I had a visual come into my mind about moving my hand over and picking up my coffee and having a drink of coffee. Now that visual is actually quite similar to the visual I was having of walking through the forest. It just seemed to be more related to what's immediately around me. But the movement was actually fired off by a visual image. That's crazy. Anyway, what these metaverse people are trying to do is they want to engage your awareness with this new layer of narrative, right? So Facebook metaverse, that's like the door in the hillside, right? Oh, I wonder what's inside, right? But the way they're going to engage you with this is like, how do you engage people with the virtual world? And the problem is like traditionally, like playing games and stuff is kind of like there's an element when it gets boring unless you're working against humans, right? Or unless the game is so well developed. Like my daughters are like crazy for this Chinese game. I think it's called Genshu. It's on the PlayStation, and it's all like they've been playing it for months and months. But the artwork and everything is so beautifully made. It's unbelievable. And like I was in their bedroom the other night, like just sitting there watching them, and they were like, and my daughter, she just won like this new avatar who's incredibly beautiful, and she's like, I can't believe it. She's so happy, you know. And but it was like she'd gained something, which, which was a graphic image. It was a character. It was a three-dimensional character which evoked real emotions, right? Because she's engaged. Her consciousness is engaged in this virtual world. Now, this virtual world is connected in some ways to the real world. So, for example, every now and then I get requests to use my card so they can buy assets. Like like my son is really into this game Roblox, right? And so he's like, dude, just before Christmas, he was like, "Hey, Dad, can I get some Roblox? Can I buy some Robux?" I'm like, "Sure, you know, whatever." So he was like, so he bought some Robux, and it was like $10. I'm like, "Fine, you know." And then we like a week later, he's like, "Oh, Dad, can I use your credit card to get some Robux?" I'm like, "Yeah, fine, you know." And he's like, "Oh, he's like, can I get this quantity?" And I look at the number. It doesn't look like a big number. I'm like, "Fine, yeah, let's get it," you know. So he bought it. There was $100 of fucking Robux. I'm like, fuck. You spent $100 in a game. That's not even buying the game. That's just so you can buy like skins or something for his character. I'm like, dude. But what it is see that game is tendrils out to the real world. I mean, that affected me, right? I'm like, dude, you doing spending that money, you know? And so these games, the my point is that one of the ways they can engage you in this virtual world is financially. And so this is one of the things that's happening. I think somebody there mentioned Sandbox. So Sandbox is this like it's a metaverse which already exists, and I guess the big thing with Sandbox is Snoop Dogg bought land there. This is like a virtual place, and Snoop Dogg, the rapper, bought land on this and built a mansion there. Now I was on their website last night, and they've got you can buy like implements and like couches. Dude, they're selling like a couch for like $5,000, like U.S. dollars to buy a couch. I mean, that's like crazy. But the thing is what happens is it seems crazy, but you know, back in 1995, carrying a telephone around with me all day seemed crazy. It's like, I don't want anybody calling me, right? But what happens is that thin strand of consciousness it leads the way, right? It's the idea, like, as much as I hate Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook, Um, I still use Facebook. I've got the ayahuasca magic group there, which is like 12,000 people on there, and it's like so there's a connection of interest, right? It's still, and I ponder about just cutting all the ties with everything and saying fuck this, like because I think about these things like I mean, do you want to occupy this space? Do you want to occupy virtual space, or do you want to occupy real space, right? And it's got a whole bunch of like interesting reverberations, which uh, which are interesting, and I don't know if they're dangerous or not. But like for example, think about like if you meet somebody online, right? Say you meet somebody online. Like I remember back, I moved down to Miami like in 1997 or 98, and I met some girl online, and she lived like a mile away, and she's like, let's meet up and like let's get together. And I saw her picture. She looked really cute. I'm like, fine, let's meet. So we met at a bar, and dude, she did not look like her picture, at all, right? But that girl wanted to get down. She wanted. That girl was crazy. Um, and I actually didn't engage. I pulled off. I'm like, yeah, yeah, whatever. Thanks. I'll get the drinks. Have a great time. But there's lots of times when that kind of stuff happens where you do engage, and so these virtual worlds actually open up uh, opportunities, and also awarenesses of things which we might not be aware of. So, for example, I'm really worried about my kids right now because they're all at the age where, like, let's talk, like, my son, for example, is 12, 11. He's like 11, 12. I think he's 12 now. And that's the age where people start getting interested in sex. And I'm starting to think, dude, I need to get like a VPN on every internet connection and just make sure there's no porno on anything, right? Because pornography is so toxic, and and just think about what that can do to destroy. Pornography destroys people, right? And people don't think that way, and our society is so permissive about it that people think it's fine, but it's incredibly toxic and destructive. And I don't want it anywhere near my kids. But just think about that. That's just one of these aspects of consciousness which is just lurking out there. Now, I remember when I was a kid, I could find porno anywhere. We were dying to find porno. Um, I remember once when we were kids in Scotland, like I think my brother or one of his friends, they found like an old porno reel, like to put in a projector, right? And we were like 12 years old, and we're like, wow. And so we invited all the neighborhood kids over, and we got my dad's projector out, and we put it up in the attic, and we played this porno film. And it was funny because it was like, this is like 1978 or something, right? And the porno was like, it was filmed from like 30 feet away of like a guy having sex with a woman in the woods, and all you can see with this guy's ass going back and forth, and it was astonishing. We're like, we can't believe this, right? And then you compare that to this highly produced, slick stuff today, and you're like, the level of engagement and detail is designed the same way as the metaverse is designed for specific things. All like media, it's all designed to pull you in, right? Um, TikTok, like TikTok, like kids watch TikTok all the time, and what it is TikTok is designed to engage your attention. It's 15 seconds, you get or whatever it is, and it switches, and it switches. I was sitting with my stepdaughter on the bed last night, and she was like, "Oh, look at this," and it was some meme. I'm like, "Yeah, okay." Oh, look at this. I'm like, "Oh, it's another," and then she's like, "Oh, look at this," and it was like, "Dude, just stop already with the fucking memes." Um, I haven't. I've read stuff about memes, but not in a while. I mean, when I did my master's degree, there was quite a bit of stuff with memes and stuff because it was with the media and whatever. But I'm not. It's not something I follow. Like I don't keep up with it. But um, anyway, what I was going to say this is the metaverse, which is not just Facebook. The metaverse is happening. That's not going to stop. That's an unstoppable movement because it's not just Facebook. See, I wasn't aware of this, but since I just got into this whole crypto space recently, there's all these the amount of money being thrown in crypto. Crypto is the underlying structure. Well, some crypto is the underlying structure of this. Now, the truth is a lot of the crypto, because it's decentralized, it offers the possibility of severing the connections from slavery, from the central banks, particularly Bitcoin, right? But the problem is there's a lot of other uh, competing coins which don't have the same ethical uh, principles, which might subsume what Bitcoin could do. Maybe not, but like I often think of like the VHS and Betamax. Like Betamax was a superior format of video, but VHS won not because it was the best, just because it was the simplest. It was the fastest produced. It was the easiest and fastest produced, right? Um, but anyway, these coins. I mean, I guess the big thing with the crypto stuff, which is interesting, is the possibility it's got to liberate humanity from the slavery. But at the same time, I mean, it's sort of like it's very difficult to discern what the overall impact will be because the one hand, if you look at pure Bitcoin and decentralization, that's got the power to destroy central banks. Let's pray that that happens, right? But then if you look at some of these other currencies, um, such as I mean, Ethereum's a good example. Ripple's a good example. XDC is a good example. There's a lot of these currencies which are actually trying to play into the central bank's hand, right? Um, and they're trying to bridge the gap between those two spaces. And it's interesting because all this stuff, what it really is it's a play of consciousness. So in the same way that I'm saying, I mean, this is not. This seems like it's an exaggeration. Um, I see digital assets the same way. There's the best way to remove the middlemen. I mean, that seems to be what it's about, and it's also the reason it's going to be attacked at some point. Um, there's a whole bunch of like laws and regulations going into place, and there's already a lot of pressure on currency exchanges to remove coins. So, for example, Monero is under attack and has been removed from several exchanges because the central banks don't like the fact that it's anonymous. Um, but I'm not sure. If you think about the raw power of the evil forces behind central banks, I'm not sure they have enough. I'm not sure if they've certainly got enough money and bad intentions to destroy humanity easily. But I think algorithms are faster potentially, right? So the money algorithms of Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin's not particularly fast money, right? But there are some other monies which are coming up, which have the potential to. I mean, I think Bitcoin is the coin, right? It's gold. But I think some of these other currencies, while they don't have the same sort of integrity, they're going to gain huge market share. And also because I think the way somebody explained it to me was that, Bitcoin is gold. And like if you invest in Bitcoin, you're actually investing in independence for humanity. But if you invest in these other currencies, what you're actually doing is you're investing in technology companies, right? So it's not about a store of value, it's about technology. But I think it's easy to underestimate how valuable that technology is. So the whole idea of the smart contracts, which are being uh, created by a lot of these currency companies, those are like earth shattering. They're earth shattering technologies, and much like Bitcoin, like people don't really. It's almost like the powers that be didn't realize the potential of Bitcoin for a long time, and I think the smart contracts have the same kind of potential that people don't really realize. Like, dude, those are paradigm shattering ideas. Like that could remove the whole legal class, right? And if you remove the legal class, then government's the next thing to shatter, right? Basically. And I think what it is the I mean, it's actually a really exciting time. It's a really exciting time. Now, the only interesting thing about these other money systems is that the is like Bitcoin is just basically a sort of algorithmic blockchain or whatever, right? And it sort of runs and it runs. Great. But these other coins, they're all getting sort of venture capital. They're being invested in as companies, right? And you've got to wonder where all that money is coming from. Who's investing in them, right? Who's investing in those coins, right? There's obviously uh, big VC companies which are well known, but where do they get their money from, right? Where do they get their money from? And so it's like, in a way, it's almost like the competition between these companies. And you think, oh no, you're grabbing onto this idea. No, this is the greatest hope for mankind. And all you're doing really is you're connecting to hope and fear again, right? It's the same game, just played at a different level, right? Um, and that's fine. But I think the thing to do is much like the guy with Rupert Spiro, is the thing you need to do is you need to separate from the emotional connection, right? Because we get so connected to these ideas. Like, this is it, man. Solana's the future. Solana's the future. Or one of the guys on the group is he's really into like Ripple, right? And what's the other one? Stellar. So there's a whole bunch of ways you can play this, but I mean it is exciting. Uh, but in a way, that this whole idea though, because in the one hand there are these paradigm shattering technologies, right, which are going to potentially shatter traditional structures of government and money. So it's kind of like Napster. Like Napster destroyed the music industry, and like crypto's got the power to shatter the financial system. Fucking great, because they're so corrupt. And the smart contracts have the power to shatter the legal system. Fucking great, because they're so corrupt, right? Um, Amazing. Then there's this other aspect of the metaverse, which is another aspect of crypto. See, I never thought of 3D as being an aspect of crypto. Never thought of that. This is like really interesting to me. But obviously, the whole NFT thing is trying to sort of, and the whole NFT thing right now seems like a bunch of bullshit, right? It's hold on a second, I'm just trying to read that. Um, yeah, I mean, like the digital assets. I mean, generally that like right now the whole NFT thing seems. I mean, it's kind of like it's clearly a bubble. It's clearly kind of nonsense at the moment, but it's that's going to simmer down, and it's going to have like real value as the NFTs become connected to what are perceived as valuable properties, right? Like most of the top NFTs are total garbage, right? I mean, to my eye as an artist, I mean, I can't understand why people would spend that kind of money. But it's not about the artwork, right? It's not about that at the moment. The cachet is about something else. It's got nothing to do with the art. But that's going to change as the art. Well, in a video game, art has functionality, right? Art is connected with algorithms, right? So a character has properties, right? So that's where the power of NFTs are going to be is in these the power of algorithmic power propagated through gameplay. I reckon, right? Because buying like a little piece of cartoon art for a couple of million just seems really stupid to me. Except in the context of like a zeitgeist moment where this possibility is being explored, right? Anyway, the whole Web3 metaverse thing presents us with this sort of divergence. One is the possibility of freedom from uh, fractional reserve banking, which is going to be very difficult to achieve. Um, the other is going to be freedom from oppressive governments, which is going to be very difficult to achieve. And at the same time, it's sort of pulling us into a metaverse, which is going to have rules which are going to be based on what? I mean, the idea is they're going to be sort of algorithmically based, right? Um, or established by what's the other buzzword? Established by the decentralized autonomous organizations, right? But all those things, I mean, they don't really, they're all really new ideas, right? They're all really new ideas. And I wonder, like, if this is like, I don't wonder. What this is the first stage of human integration with artificial intelligence, is what it is. It's moving human governance from representative politics into sort of more algorithmic uh, space. And I don't know what I think about that, but I think it's good to be aware of it, right? It's good to be aware. It's good to separate from the excitement. I mean, when I think of the destruction of the Federal Reserve Bank, dude, I get really happy. Like I feel joy in my heart when I think about that, you know. But it's like, but you know, this it's all, I mean, it's all part of it. It's kind of like it's those are just there's something about it which is designed to pull your attention towards it, right? Um, and then when I think about metaverse, I remember those times playing games where it was actually really boring, and does making it is connecting digital assets with money, with real money. I mean, it certainly is going to make you connect at a higher emotional level, right? If you actually buy something, I mean, you're gonna feel connected. There's like when my son bought that $100 worth of Robux, dude, he was like pretty proud with all the stuff he was doing, showing his friends. Like I don't know what he bought, but you know, he was like a sense of pride, right? Emotional connection to digital assets. Uh, and the way I get it, you know, I work in 3D graphics. You know, I just did this. I did this NFT project last week, and it's actually what the NFT project. I can I talk about that? Well, I can't talk about what the theme was because that's probably secret. But it was a side. It was a video. It was like a minute and a half long video showing a launch of a spaceship, which was modeled in 3D, launching and going off into space and landing on a certain planet and creating a base on this planet. And this is all part of a strategy for a larger NFT project. Um, and you know, the thing is, I enjoy the work and stuff. It's fun and it's creative and imaginative and all those things. And any creative endeavor, yeah, I don't even know, man. I don't know. I mean, there's like the crossover point here is it's really strange where like these all these ideas combine with finance and everything. What the fuck is going on there? This is like a weird. It's a really strange conjunction for me, you know, because I literally had no interest in this stuff 6 months ago, and all of a sudden it's just exploded, and it's like mentally, and it's just everything. It's just everything's just coalesced. It's the same thing. It's the same thing as what I'm already doing. I'm already. How did I get? I don't even know how I got involved with this NFT stuff, and I'm making them. And I'm like, how did that even happen? You know? And it's is that a coincidence? Is that a coincidence? Because you know the whole. I don't know how you feel about this, but like the whole metaverse, crypto, Web3 space, that all seemed kind of like abstract to me 2 months ago, right? Um, and it doesn't feel abstract anymore. It's like that is happening. That is not going to stop. Um, I don't think Facebook will have much success with it myself. I think they'll get wiped out by the next technology, hopefully. But yeah, no, I think I'm coming to an end here. I think I sort of I talked mainly what I was thinking about talking about with this whole idea. But I think the main takeaway from this, if there's a takeaway, is this: is um, yeah, the whole thing is this. It's the funny that here's what is the weird about me. Here's what's weird about me. Here's what's weird is that when I meditate, I spend a lot of time specifically moving into different spaces, right? It's like a big part of what I do. Sometimes I do the visualizations and move in to different spaces. Like I'll move into the heart, I'll move into a diamond inside the heart. I'll find a deity inside the diamond, and then I'll find the diamond inside the heart of the deity. And then once I'm in that diamond, I'll start doing the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra, and I abide in the infinite space of the mantra. Or, dude, you can do that anywhere. Like what you find is like as thought forms come up, like sometimes like I'll get like really atrocious thought forms like attacking me, you know, like um what's a good example of this? I can't think of a good example right now, but like oh, like a couple of weeks ago I had a terrible dream, woke up and it still felt that the dream was active. It still felt like there was like it was an entity or something. I can't remember what it was, but like there was like an entity in the room or something. And so what I did is I just move into the space, and then I find like a space between me and the entity, and I just go into the mantra, right? And it you move into the space between the structures, between the structures. Sometimes they're astral, sometimes they're mental, whatever they are, and you explore the space. It's kind of like vipassana in a way, and you can do it with vipassana. You know, you can start like pulsing awareness around your body, and like some of the vipassana guys, they get down to the molecular level, you know, and they're moving, looking for space between molecules. Done that, right? And you can find a space, and fucking it radiates energy like a neutron bomb. It's unbelievable. So awareness of space is really important, like with consciousness and becoming aware of the arising of concepts and trying to become aware of like where they're rising from. So I guess my point is that the is in Initiation into Hermetics, the book by Franz Verdun. There's a whole bunch of practices about how to meditate, how to place your consciousness in specific spaces. And there's a specific chapter about moving your consciousness, projecting your consciousness into other objects, right? Now, what happens is we project our consciousness into other objects all day long. We just don't realize we're doing it, right? We don't realize we're projecting our consciousness into other objects, but we do it all the time. It's unbelievable. And so, but the point is that when you start trying to project your consciousness into other objects, it feels kind of like bullshit, even though you do it all day long, because now it's like you're trying to, you have to come to terms with the idea that it's possible because you didn't realize you were doing it. And, you know, so you're moving consciousness into external objects and external events other people, ideas, and the typically our consciousness is pulled into areas which we don't we're not aware that we're doing it. Now, a lot of the typically our consciousness is going to be pushed based on underlying karmic energies. So you're born into this world, you have a store of karmic energies, whatever they are, and those energies are pushing out. And as they push out, they're going to express themselves behaviorally, in actions you take, and also in the events around us. Um, and so the best thing you can do is try and become at least aware that that's happening. And like the whole crypto thing is moving 1,000,000 miles an hour, 1,000,000 miles an hour, literally. There's a lot of these crypto spaces are a lot of these crypto properties have gone up like 16,000% this year. I mean, the possibilities to make profits are outrageous, you know. Um, but that velocity makes it really difficult to take the pause necessary to sort of like what's going on, what is actually happening, right? And that velocity represents energy. Where's the energy coming from, right? The velocity represents energy. What does the energy represent? So the spaces of the spaces, the social spaces, the crypto spaces, the cultural spaces, the spaces in civilization, the spaces in consciousness are all the spaces in meditation are all connected. So the thing to do is invest. The thing to do is invest, right? The thing to do is just try at least try and become aware of what like of the energy movement. And this is this is something like something which Buddhist meditators do a lot is the noting. So as thoughts come up, you note them, note the thoughts. What is that? And I go through a thing too where I note the velocity of thoughts, right? Like I watch how fast I look at the velocity and like where the energy comes from, right? And I think that's really important now, like too, like with this socially, there's so much movement going on. Dude, who knows? Anyway, I think I'm done. I think I've out lived the length of this chat. Um, but I did want to do a video because I haven't done one in a while. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. So many things I can say, but I'm gonna let it go. Okay. Peace out, you guys. Bye.